We already have done an extraordinary job, the men and women of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. That is completely false.
Well, I would hope you would have read it because you're talking about an $8 billion budget here. I'm not asking you about your resume.
If you are fleeing persecution, how can it be that a year later you are spending summers in Cuba?
Have you vetted all of the people who have, all of the 8.4 million people who have come into our country illegally? It takes you an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes, and you try to filibuster us and use up our time.
60 minutes is not 45 minutes, because I can't seem to answer a question without being interrupted.
Either you're not qualified to manage a Costco food court, or you believe in open borders.
Do you believe that a border wall is part of the answer? Yes or no?
No.
How many abortions for pregnant migrant girls has the Office of Refugee Resettlement facilitated?
2020, 458,000 encounters. 2023, 2.5 million.
It's a pretty simple, straightforward question. Would you
Senator?
just answer it? Secretary Mayorkas, how many people have entered the country illegally across our southern border since the Biden administration took office? A number.
Senator, it's over 6 million encounters at our southern border.
And how many of those 6 million are still in the country?
Senator, I can get you that information.
So do you know?
Senator, I don't want to
Would you provide us with a number of how many of those 6 million that crossed our border illegally are still in the country?
I would be pleased to provide you with any data that you request, Senator.
Of the 2.5 million that crossed our southern border illegally last year, how many of them remain in the country?
Again, Senator, I'd be very pleased to provide you with the data with respect to how many removals have been effected, how many voluntary removals, how many forced removals, how many expulsions, how many individuals
But
are
you
in
came to the hearing
immigration.
today and you don't have those numbers? You are the head of DHS and you came to this hearing today without those numbers.
That is correct, and I'd be pleased to provide you with that data. We certainly have it at our disposal.
We've asked for them before and we haven't got them, so we'll be looking forward to getting them. Don't we start with national security here at home? Border security? Is border security part of national security?
Senator, border security is indeed part of Homeland Security and national security.
If that is the case, then as Senator Graham said, as Senator Moran said, don't we need to make sure that as we look at this supplemental, we have security for our southern border as part of what's included?
Absolutely, Senator, this supplemental.
So we do need to have that in the package.
This supplemental, Senator, advances our security mission by enabling us
All right.
to hire the personnel and the technology.
I understand. Now, if you agree that we need to secure the southern border as part of this package, and I just went through a lot of metrics and you don't know the answers to it. You're sitting here today and you did not give me the numbers. You say, well, I'll go get the numbers. Gee whiz, I don't have them here today. I don't know what they are. If we're going to have security in this package, don't we need some metrics so we can show the American people that, in fact, we are reducing the encounters. We are reducing the number of people that are here illegally. We are reducing the number of people on the terrorist watch list that are coming across. We are reducing the number of gotaways. We need metrics to show that, don't we?
Yes.
So you would agree that that needs to be part of this supplemental package?
Senator.
Would you agree with that or not? You just said we need to secure the border as part of the package.
I'm not sure what your question is now.
We need some kind of metrics and tracking to show that we are in fact reducing the number of people coming here and staying here illegally as part of this supplemental package. Do you agree or not agree with that?
Senator, we can discuss what metrics are best to show the progress that we make, whether it is
Of
funding.
course we'll discuss it. The question is whether we need to include it. Do you think we need some way to track that we're making progress on this problem? Look at the chart. Should that just keep going up infinitum, or should we start bringing it down? And how do you know if you don't have some metrics as part of this package?
Senator,
So do you think they ought to be included or not? It's a pretty simple, straightforward question. Would you
Senator,
just answer it?
Senator, we need funding for additional personnel and technology to advance the security of the border.
Still
And
won't
that-
simply say we need the metrics to show that we're solving the problem and bringing down the number of people who come and stay here illegally.
Talk to us about additional funding through the HHS will address the harm our communities are facing.
Madam Chair, there's not a state or not a community in America that doesn't need more assistance to tackle the opioid crisis, now driven mostly by fentanyl. Some 70% of these overdoses as a result of opioids are really now driven by fentanyl. We need to do much more, they will tell you. We can help with the prevention and the treatment. Secretary Mayorkas, I know we'll talk about the interdiction, but without the help, we're going to lose Americans. We know it, and we're doing everything we can for making naloxone more available to people to save lives, but also working with those on the ground who've been saving lives from day one. We want them to have the resources they need.
Thank you. And Secretary Mayorkas, what will the President's supplemental request allow you to do to stop fentanyl from entering our country?
Chair Murray, it will assist us significantly in our interdiction efforts. We already have done an extraordinary job. The men and women of U.S. Customs and Border Protection and Homeland Security investigations have engaged in a number of operations, Operation Blue Lotus, Operation Artemis, which is surging our personnel and our technological resources to the ports of entry where the majority of the fentanyl is smuggled into our country. We are working with our international partners. The $1.3 billion that the supplemental request calls for will assist us with additional personnel, additional technological resources, and the ability to work with our international partners to really drive an encompassing approach to our interdiction efforts.
Thank you, Vice Chair Collins.
Since President Biden has been president and since you have been secretary, how many members of Hamas have come into our country across the southern border?
Senator, I'm not aware of a member of Hamas crossing the border.
Have you stopped a member of Hamas from coming in?
Senator, I am not aware of a member of Hamas being encountered at our southern border.
Have you vetted all of the people who have, all of the 8.4 million people who have come into our country illegally?
Senator, you and I have spoken about this before. As you know, we screen and vet individuals.
Have you vetted all of them?
Senator, as you know, we screen and vet individuals whom we encounter.
You haven't vetted all of them, have you?
Senator, as I said, we screen and vet individuals whom we encounter at our
All right,
border.
I want to move on because, with respect, Mr. Secretary, to quote a public official in my state, it takes you an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes, and you try to filibuster us and use up our time. What is a safe third country policy?
Senator, a safe third country policy is a policy that provides as follows, that when an individual is fleeing their country of origin by reason of fear of persecution, and they traverse another country that can provide them safety from that fear, then they may not qualify for humanitarian relief in their ultimate country of destination because they
Let
have
me stop you because you're watching 60 Minutes again.
Well, it's Senator.
A safe third country policy, you can tell me if I misunderstand this. Safe third country policy says America has joined the UN treaty that says if you're being persecuted politically or for race or for religion in your own country, you can seek asylum in the United States. But this is the safe third country part. You have to seek that asylum in the first safe third country that you enter. Is that basically correct?
Of the safe third country policy? Are you asking me, is that a correct
Yes, I am.
assessment? Yes, but let me also
Okay,
just.
let me ask you this, Mr. Secretary. Safe third country policies have been around for over 40 years, haven't they?
I don't know,
They started in the 1980s in of all places, Scandinavia, didn't they?
I don't know, Senator.
And the UK has a safe third country policy, doesn't it?
Senator, the UK is underway in addressing its immigration challenges.
Spain has a safe third country policy, doesn't it?
Senator, if you know the answer to the question, I'm not sure why you're posing it to me.
Greece has a safe third country policy, doesn't it? Because I want to know if you know. You don't even know how many people are coming into our country.
That is not
Greece
true.
has a safe third country policy, doesn't it?
Senator, I disagree with the statement that you.
I understand, but does Greece have a safe third country policy?
I do not know if it does.
Canada, the EU, Turkey, Norway, all have safe third country policies,
It's
don't they?
interesting, it's interesting you cite Canada because I negotiated the Safe Third
Yeah,
Country Agreement.
and the first thing that President Biden did, and you did, when you took office, was abolish our safe third country policies. Now, in 2023, this is Senator Hovind's chart. What percentage of the illegal immigrants who came across the southern border were not from Mexico? Do you know?
Senator, I know that third country nationals has been on the increase, the number of encounters.
What percentage?
I can certainly.
You don't know, do you?
I can
Okay.
certainly.
It's 71%, okay, are not people who are not from Mexico. So if we had a safe third country policy, that means that 71% of the 8.4 million people that if you have allowed to come into our country illegally, let me be conservative and use 6.6 million because the 8.4 includes gotaways. 71% of the 6.6 million people that you have allowed into our country illegally would not be hurt in any way. They could claim asylum from political or religious or racial persecution, but they would have to do it in another country, more than likely Mexico. Is that not the case?
Senator, that is an incomplete and inaccurate accounting of the Safe Third Country.
And did you not say, when we last spoke, and I proposed that, you thought it was a bad policy?
Senator, let me share with you a prerequisite to a Safe Third Country agreement, and that is.
No, I'm almost out of time, and I'm not going to let you filibuster, Mr. Secretary.
Well, Senator, I have to say that 60
Well,
minutes.
I'm just not going to let you do
Senator
it.
Kennedy, if he can respond,
Well,
you're out of time, but I'd like to.
It's my time, Madam Chair, and I'm going to use it the way I want.
Your time is expired.
Well, you let others go on. Here's what I think, Mr. Secretary. I think you're a smart guy. Now, there are only one or two things going on here. Either you're not qualified to manage a Costco food court, or you believe in open borders.
Senator
And I think it's the
Senator
latter.
Kennedy, your time has expired. Thank you.
I would just say the following two things. Number one, you're 0 for 2 on that. You're inaccurate in both respects, number one. And I'd like the record to reflect that 60 minutes is not 45 minutes, because I can't seem to answer a question without being interrupted. I just wanted to make that comment.
Well, if you would answer a
Senator
question.
Thank you very
it would
much.
be
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Appreciate the recognition.
This is a breathtaking proposal that basically requests the authority for DHS to reprogram any amounts, all existing past, present, and future amounts of ICE funding, the ability to redirect that funding in its entirety, if that were your decision, to non-law enforcement activities. There's a litany of them listed there, including to non-governmental organizations. In essence, it would allow you to defund ICE to some extent, maybe to its entirety, and place those funds to other purposes. I looked for this same request in your October budget proposal, and I didn't find it. So, Mr. Secretary, are you still requesting this?
Senator, I have never proposed the defunding of ICE. I would vigorously.
Secretary, that's the exact, please read this language that I handed to you here.
Senator, I would vigorously oppose the defunding of ICE, and please recall that I served for 12 years as a federal prosecutor, and I believe devoutly in the law enforcement mission of that agency.
I'm not asking you about your resume, Mr. Secretary. I'm asking you about the language that's plainly here in the page. This language asks for the authority, that we grant you the authority, DHS, the authority to reprogram the funds that are intended for law enforcement at ICE, the authority to reprogram to the variety of things like non-governmental organizations, which are clearly not law enforcement. I mean, are you denying this would allow you the ability to reprogram even $1?
Oh, let me be clear, Senator, because it's I would want to read this carefully and in the context.
Well, I would hope you would have read it, because you're talking about an $8 billion budget here, and you're here to defend this budget right now.
Senator, let me be clear that there are different types of detention that work for different individuals to ensure their appearance in the immigration enforcement proceedings in which we place them. For example, there are individuals who pose a threat to public safety that need to be detained in a full custodial setting. There are individuals who do not pose a public safety threat, as to whom we have some level of assurance of their continued appearance in enforcement proceedings, and therefore we place them on alternatives to detention. There very well may be individuals that will continue to appear in their immigration enforcement proceedings if they are in a community-based residential center.
Well, here's what
For
this
example,
this proposal, though, specifically asks about the budget for the only law enforcement agency that we have that is charged with the deportation of people that have come to this country illegally, many of them with criminal records. And what this asks for is the authority to reprogram that budget, to defund ICE, and take those funds and use them for a variety of things, including giving them to non-governmental organizations. What it asks for, in essence, the way I read this, is to give ICE a different purpose. You have the ability to reprogram ICE and turn it into a travel agency that brings illegal immigrants here and sends them to hotels in New York City. You're going to turn this into an electromagnet if we were to allow you this authority.
that is completely false.
Then why is it
your-
requested in this manner, Mr. Secretary? Can you look at the language here and tell me that's not what you're requesting?
Senator, is it your assertion that when we contract out to an organization outside of the government to deliver greater efficiency?
My assertion is
that
that you
we
are
are-
asking for the ability to redirect, or reprogram is the technical term you use, to reprogram ICE funding to those sorts of purposes. That is a defunding of law enforcement. And placing those law enforcement funds, which we desperately need law enforcement,
So Senator,
and putting them into custodial services or anything that might make it more convenient or more attractive to come to this country illegally.
Senator, so your assertion is that when we contract out, we are defunding the organization?
No, and I'd like to reclaim my time because I'm running out of it. This is not an assertion, this is a plain reading of the language here. You're asking for breathtaking authority to reprogram to defund ICE.
That is
You're
incorrect.
not backing away from this request. I'm not talking about the custodial services, I'm talking about your request to defund ICE up to the entirety of their budget. And I'm going to do everything I can to stop that from happening here.
Tell us how your hands are tied to try to efficiently manage the border if you don't have the resources you need to properly do all of the functions that USCIS is engaged in at the border and throughout our legal immigration system. Why is this really important, and why is it important for Republicans and Democrats to come together to support that funding?
Senator, thank you for your inquiry. When we have more asylum officers and when we have more support personnel to assist them in accomplishing the mission that they are expert in performing, then what we are able to do is drive greater efficiency in the asylum system, including shortening the time in between the time of the credible fear interview and the ultimate adjudication, including in between the time of initial encounter and the credible fear interview.
You come from Cuba, you are presumed to be for fleeing political persecution. So you automatically are eligible for refugee cash, you're eligible for food stamps, you're eligible for Medicaid. Others who immigrate to this country have to wait 5 years for those and don't get the refugee cash. But within a year, depending if you're paroled, you can apply for a green card. And then you can travel back to Cuba as often as you want, multiple times. You can take cash. You can buy stuff with the food stamps. I've seen it. Okay, this is not, I didn't read this in a magazine. I've seen it. They use the food stamps, they fill up these bags, and they take it back to Cuba over there, or they just transfer cash back. Some people go back to Cuba for 3 months at a time. They've been here a year. How, if you are fleeing persecution, how can it be that a year later you are spending summers in Cuba? How can it be that less than a year later you're traveling back 6, 8 times a year to Cuba? I've never heard of people fleeing persecution going back to a place repeatedly. There's an issue here, is there not?
Senator, you respectfully allow me to say that you've misdescribed the Cuban Adjustment Act and what happens when an individual from Cuba arrives in the United States, because we do indeed remove individuals to Cuba. So.
Assuming Cuba will accept them and they're ineligible for some reason, right?
That is correct.
But the overwhelming majority do not get removed.
That is,
Which is fine. I'm just saying, if once you, I'm not talking about the people that are here. Once you are here, you're assumed here because you're a refugee fleeing persecution, and you have a host of benefits at a minimum. If a year later you're here on a refugee, but you're going back to Cuba 6 times, shouldn't you at least lose the refugee status?
Senator, let me follow up with your concern. The question being, if I understand it correctly, is if indeed an individual flees the country of origin by reason of fear of persecution, they obtain refugee status because
Specifically Cuban in this case.
because that fear has been affirmed and they are now a refugee. Does their desire and actually travel to the country of origin militate against the legitimacy of their claim?
Actually, if it's a year later.
Senator Baldwin?
I will follow up on that, Senator.
How is DHS working with law enforcement partners to both stop the initial flow of fentanyl into our country and then prevent its distribution within our borders? And how will that work be strengthened with the funding in the supplemental request?
Homeland Security Investigations, the premier law enforcement investigative agency within the Department of Homeland Security, housed at Immigration and Customs Enforcement, has transnational criminal investigative units, TCIUs, that work very closely with our law enforcement partners to the south, in Mexico, in the Central American countries, to address the production of fentanyl, to address the trafficking in the precursor chemicals, the movement of equipment, the movement of monies, all aspects of the transnational criminal organizations, so that we dismantle and disrupt them.
There were 6,610 encounters at the southern border. On Monday, that number was 8,500, which is 8.5 times more than the 1,000 daily encounters that your former boss, Secretary Jay Johnson, said would constitute a crisis. I know on that day, on March 29th, you did not say that we had a crisis. My question for you is today, do you believe that we have a crisis before us?
Senator, let me make this point that is very, very important, because I've been asked, would I describe it as a disaster? Would I describe it as a crisis? I do not diminish the significance and the complexity of the challenge. No, if I may.
Well, I only have 5 minutes and I only have 3 left. So is it a crisis, yes or not? I guess I'm going to move on. Secretary Becerra, do you think that we have a child care crisis, affordable child care crisis in this country?
Senator, I don't think there's any doubt that we
Okay,
have.
that's what I thought. Okay, so, but this is an emergency, Secretary Mayorkas. It is an emergency, though.
It is urgent that we receive the funding for our personnel and our tools to enhance the
I
security
think
of our
we just need
border.
to use the words, it's true. It's an emergency. That's what this administration said. They put it in an emergency supplemental request. So let's treat it as such. Do you believe that a border wall is part of the answer? Yes or no?
No.
No. Okay, so I have a trouble reconciling that with the rule that you signed and issued on October 5th, where you said construction of physical barriers on the border of the United States would, in fact, prevent unlawful entries.
Senator, so if I may explain, the Congress mandated that we employ
But you didn't actually have to issue a rule. We could have done that. And one more thing, this administration and your department, the Department of Homeland Security, issued a contract for $500,000 in September of 2001 for the purchase and installation of a wall around this president's beach house. So y'all do know walls work. You do know they're part of the solution. You do know they're part of creating security. But for whatever reason, you feel like the American people are beneath that. And I think that it is incredibly frustrating.
Please explain why Congress should provide you with billions more so-called border security funding if you're just going to keep the same failed policies in place.
Senator, I respectfully disagree with the factual premise of your question. I do not think it is a failure of policy. It is the failure of a broken immigration system. It is also the product of an under-resourced, perennially under-resourced department. This supplemental will assist us in further securing the border by adding critically needed additional personnel and technology.
Secretary Becerra, how many abortions for pregnant migrant girls has the Office of Refugee Resettlement illegally facilitated across state lines over the past year, and what was that cost to taxpayers?
Senator, thank you for the question. I want to assure you that at the Department of Health and Human Services, we comply with the law when it comes to providing health services or making sure Americans have access to the services. We make sure that we follow the laws that have been passed by Congress, including the Hyde Amendment. And so the services that we provide to those individuals who are within our care through the unaccompanied child program, they will receive health care services, but it's all within compliance within the law.
Okay, if you wish to disagree with me on the legal aspect, let me put it this way. How many abortions for pregnant migrant girls has the Office of Refugee Resettlement facilitated across state lines over the past year, and what was that cost to taxpayers?
So, Senator, we make sure in compliance with the law that if, for example, emergency services are needed for an individual in our care, we would make sure that they provide those services. We also want to make sure that we assist any individual in being able to execute on their rights to have health care services. So
Do
we
you
will
know the
assist.
numbers?
I could try to get back to you on any precise numbers.
Okay, that's what I'm asking for, is just how much did it cost the taxpayers and how many were there?
Perhaps you could just expand briefly as to, once again, why this is an investment in our country and in our economy, and to actually be penny wise is truly being pound foolish.
Senator, thank you. Every dollar we put into the Stabilization Fund for Child Care makes sure that a family can go to work and still know that the child will be taken care of. And by the way, I should emphasize that principally means a woman can go to work, because more often than not, it will be the woman who has to sacrifice the job to stay home to care for the child.
Included in the supplemental funding request is over $2.5 billion for immigrations and customs enforcement. And I've had longstanding concerns about the conditions at the Torrance County Detention Facility, where in 2022, the Department of Homeland Security's OIG actually recommended immediately relocating all of the ICE detainees from Torrance until the facility ensures adequate staffing and safe living conditions. A later subsequent DHS OIG report reaffirmed the same sort of basket of problems. And so what I want to ask, I have a very simple request for you. I want you to become personally familiar with this facilities and its challenges. Will you commit to doing that?
I will, and I should say two things.
Go ahead.
One, the conditions in ICE detention facilities is indeed a priority, and for the first time, we closed 5 facilities that did not comply with the conditions that we insist upon. I commit to you to look at the Torrance facility, Senator.
I look forward to working with you on that.
Can we just not say we're filled up right now and we can't not have any more seats? Is that possible? Do you have that flexibility?
Senator, we do not have that authority under the law.
So we have to change the law to give you the authority to basically say, whether it's a pause or stop, whatever it would take, that we cannot, basically humanitarianly handle the people we're sending into the country right now. When we call it third party, okay, the third country processing, what they've explained to me, we're playing defense on the 1-yard line. Any way the ball crosses that goal line, that's a touchdown. Now, if we were playing defense on the 20-yard line, that means third party going into those countries, stopping that, making sure we qualify that would make a big difference. Does that take policy change also?
We have implemented that policy change within the constraints of a broken system. So we have set up secure mobility offices in various countries as triage centers to see whether individuals could qualify for relief in the United States. And if indeed we have made a determination that they do, then we're able to bring them safely and in an orderly way.
It's obvious that DHS needs additional resources to help this process move forward. I would encourage the Department of Homeland Security and the administration to also recognize what I think is fairly obvious, which is that policy must be changed in order for us to get control of the situation on the border. The number of migrants who are crossing into just my small state alone every day is 8 to 10 times as much as it was under the Obama administration. Without policy changes, the cartels will continue to decide who enters our country through what ports and what times. Thank you.
We have been, during the Biden administration, overwhelmed at the border by the numbers who have come in or tried to enter into the United States. Is that correct as well?
The numbers have been unprecedented, Senator.
And can you tell me your explanation as to why that occurred?
Senator, that is not something that is specific to the southern border of the United States. That is a global phenomenon. We have the largest number of displaced people in the world today since World War II. And that is something that is gripping our entire hemisphere.
I reject the idea this is a global phenomenon problem. I think you're misdiagnosing the problem. This is policy changes y'all instituted that I told you wouldn't work, and we now need to fix that. Trend lines, 2020, 458,000 encounters, 2023, 2.5 million. We need to change that, don't we, that trend line?
We most certainly do, which is
Okay,
precisely.
fair enough.
2019 is an important year as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm worried about tomorrow. The highest encounters was in September. Things need to change, you agree, like now?
Indeed, and that is
Okay, all right,
precisely
great.
why we have sought our supplemental funding and why
I
we
just think
continue
your
to.
supplemental makes everything worse, not better. What's the denial rate of asylum claims?
Well, Senator, we'd have to break it down. The asylum system has an initial screening rate. As you know, the credible
I think
fear.
the final determination is about 90% of the claims are eventually denied. Am I in the ballpark?
Senator, I believe that is inaccurate.
Okay, well,
I
what
also think
percentage of claims
It
are?
also depends on the demographics.
No,
This
I'm
is-
asking you a simple question. You're the head of DHS, and you can't tell me how many asylum claims are approved versus denied.
Generally speaking, across the board on a macro basis, it's approximately 75%.
Okay, so if 75% are denied, would you work with me to change the initial screening standard?
Senator, I will work with you to achieve a comprehensive solution because a piecemeal solution will lead to remaining
Well,
problems.
if you're expecting comprehensive immigration reform between now, that's not going to happen. There were 240,000 people paroled this fiscal year. Did you do a case-by-case analysis?
Senator, we comply with the law.
So there is a file for all 240,000 where somebody determined they meet these two criteria
There is an individualized determination made by
on
our
all
personnel.
240,000. And I can see that.
Yes, Senator.
Okay, I'm asking for that.
Very well,
So in
Senator.
your opinion, 240,000 people were individually screened and granted parole. You're not blanket paroling people, are you?
That is correct, Senator.
So is your testimony under oath that you're not giving blanket parole from people from 4 countries?
Senator, we have
Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba,
and Haiti.
and Haiti. So you're telling me that you've looked at every person and you gave them parole on an individual screening basis? Is
Senator-
that what your testimony is?
Senator, we have a parole program.
No. Did you do what I asked you? Did you follow the law, or are you giving blanket parole?
We follow the law.
Okay. The law requires an individual assessment.
Senator, we make our decisions on a case-by-case basis.
There's 280-something people on the terrorist watch list that we know of. Where are they?
Senator, the terrorist screening data set,
Where are the people?
the individuals whom we encounter that are on the terrorist screening data set
Are they out of the country?
are screened.
Are they out of the country or are they in the country?
Senator, they very well may be out of the country.
But you
They
don't
may be-
know. There are people on the terrorist watch list, and you can't tell me where they're at.
That is not my testimony.
Well, okay, where are they?
Senator, if you would allow me
Yeah, please.
the opportunity to answer. Individuals who are encountered at the southern border,
Okay,
who are in the terrorist screening data set,
okay.
may not necessarily be known or suspected terrorists, number one. Number two, individuals who pose a threat to our national security are an enforcement priority for us. They are the priority that are subject to removal.
Do you think you're doing a good job?
Senator, I'm incredibly proud to support the men and women of the Department of Homeland Security.
I didn't ask about them, I asked
That is my
about
answer.
you.
That is my answer.
Okay, well, I think we need to change this system, and you're completely out of touch with the nature of the problem.
How would you change those seeking, migrants seeking asylum to present themselves at legal points of entry, limitations on parole, stricter punishment of visa overstays, to limit those pull factors and to reduce illegal immigration?
Senator, thank you very much for the opportunity. The supplemental funding request that we have submitted would assist us tremendously in our border enforcement efforts with respect to the hiring and deployment of personnel, the procurement and implementation of technology. What we need is an encompassing solution to an encompassing problem when we speak of policy changes.
I think what you're proposing at best just keeps it as it is now. There's not going to be any reduction. Am I wrong in that?
Yes, you are.
So give me a reason for that.
Is it?
Give me some numbers.
Senator, first of all, I want to make it clear, the devastation.
Give me a reason that we're gone from 3.6 to 6.5 million.
Senator, is it your assertion that the hiring of additional Office of Principal Legal Advisor attorneys at Immigration and Customs Enforcement with a complement of additional immigration judges would not work to advance the immigration case backlog in immigration court proceedings?
I don't know. Tell me how many. Tell me how many that would do, because I think probably what that would do is just maintain where we're at right now.
That is absolutely
with
false.
The people that are coming across. Well, give me the numbers that it would do.
Senator,
make it where it is false.
Senator, I would be very pleased to confer with you and Senator Hoeven to discuss the quantification of advancement that we would accomplish with additional funding. But I think it is rather axiomatic, quite frankly, that additional Border Patrol agents will advance the security mission at the southern border.
Should the federal government help disaster survivors stay in their communities?
Senator, I believe that the answer is yes, that we should try to do everything possible to rebuild, restore, and prove the resiliency of a community. The challenge in Maui has been quite unique because of its situation, as you well know, better than do I, as an island. And so there was initially the need to remove the hazardous material. Then, as you correctly note, there's the debris removal, which will be time-consuming because of the geographic and other challenges that the island confronts. But I do believe in devoting resources and energy to the rebuilding of a community rather than solely an exodus from it.
Give me 2 or 3 specific examples that we could do, policy change, that would make a difference.
Senator, I think the president on day one set forth a blueprint that
Well, pick 3 out of there that you think are the best, the most meaningful.
Senator, I would be quite hesitant to rank which ones are the best, but I continue to adhere to the approach that when we're speaking of a system that has not been reformed since 1996, that we need to reform it from top to bottom.
If you go to New York City, what's the average time that your case would be heard, your asylum case would be heard?
Senator, it's a individualized case analysis, but I will tell you, on average, it is multiple years in too many cases, that it is the time of final adjudication of an asylum case.